Started my self-love journey to learn how to love myself more, but then doing challenging things like going and dining amongst couples on the most romantic day of the year alone was major for my confidence.
I would say it's not that challenging to go to a restaurant and dine, but to be fair, I get where she's coming from. And actually, this is another point that guys can take from this. If you're watching this, we do need to step outside our comfort zone. Okay, so if you are watching this as a dude and you're thinking, well, I can't even get a date, so what's this girl talking about? The value of that part is actually, yes, getting out there, maybe going out on your own, going out solo, and then interacting with people as you go out solo and pushing that comfort zone. It's so important, okay? And if you're not able to do that, then it's really, it's going to be a very uphill battle for you, okay? Game and getting better at relationships, getting better at integrating with the opposite sex or forming relationships with the opposite sex, it's not a thing that can be done in theory. It's not a thing that can be done by studying online or reading a book or watching a YouTube video. It's something that has to be played out there in the field, okay? So I would say, for women, maybe you're between relationships, it probably is a good thing to go out alone sometimes and maybe just go and have a meal on your own and just get used to being comfortable with yourself. And also, look, there's going to be dudes around, right? So you might have the opportunity, you might see a guy, if you give him some approach signals, he might come and speak to you, and that could be a great outcome for you, okay? If you're a guy and you're finding dating difficult, again, you've got to go out there, put yourself out there, and if you don't have any friends to go out with or nobody's available, go out on your own, go out solo. I've done many, many, many nights out solo, even doing night game, going to bars, going to clubs, going to restaurants, all that kind of thing. It doesn't faze me now. I could quite happily go out tonight, Valentine's Day, have a table in the middle of a restaurant with a bunch of couples around me. I don't give a shit, okay? But you get to that point through time and experience and just not caring what people around you think. And although I was initially kind of laughing a little bit at her, making it up like it's this huge thing, I do take her point. Actually, going out and being social on your own can be quite daunting at first. So it's something you need to lean into. That which scares us, we should lean into.
And because people respond in shock, I now document that journey online because I want people to change their perceptions of what it means to be single versus taken, and why does being taken automatically equate to you lead a better, fulfilling, more successful life. Like, that is utter BS, okay? I've been more miserable in the 4 past failed relationships I've been in rather than the entire...
I thought she was going to say, I've been more miserable in the 4 months since I've been with my boyfriend. Obviously not.
Yeah, I took out for myself. In fact, I flourished in that year. I got so much success. I grew into my own. I learned so many standards about what I wanted in my life that I wouldn't have known otherwise had I not taken that time out to think for myself. And majority of my confidence came about when I was single. You know why? Because I couldn't attach my confidence to other people or what other people thought of me because they weren't even in my vicinity. Like, I was always alone. That means that my opinion automatically was the most important one because it was the only one I was surrounding myself with. So I thought I would give you guys a little story time of past Valentine's because they weren't even in my vicinity. Otherwise, had I not taken that time out to think for myself. And majority of my confidence came about when I was single. You know why? Because I couldn't attach my confidence to other people or what other people thought of me because they weren't even in my vicinity. Like, I was always alone. That means that my opinion automatically was the most important one because it was the only one I was surrounding myself with. So I thought I would give you guys...
All right, so, I mean, that's not a bad point, actually. I think that the times that I have spent single, and I've been single really for the last 3 years. I mean, not that I haven't dated, I haven't seen people, obviously I have, but I haven't been in anything serious for about the past 3 years. And I do think that the mental clarity and the mental strength and the strength of personality that you get through that experience is very, very strong. And in the past, I was always somebody who would go into serial relationships, really, or I say serial. I mean, let's face it, they were overlapping, and there were overlaps within the overlaps. But essentially, it will be a main girl, another main girl, another main girl, another main girl. And what you're kind of doing with that is, firstly, you're trying to avoid the pain of being on your own for a period of time. You break with somebody, and maybe that's painful, and you don't want to face up to that. So then you're like, okay, well, I'll just jump onto the next and I'll feel okay again. And it sort of sort of works a little bit, but it doesn't really work very well. And all you're really doing in the end is just delaying that pain anyway. And secondly, and this again, it sounds cheesy as fuck. It sounds like just cap or whatever, but it's true. You don't get to learn about yourself because you only really get to learn about yourself in the times when you are alone and you are able, like she says, to make decisions for yourself and not have to take other people's opinions on board to the same extent. You know, there's a lot of advantages to being in a relationship, but there are also a lot of advantages to being single as well. And people, guys as well as women, will often think, well, I just need to get into a relationship and then everything's going to be great. I'm going to be happy. And you look at the, you know, the black pill guys, the doomer guys online, and that's the narrative. It's like, well, I will never be happy because I won't find a relationship. If only a girl would give me a chance, but she won't because I'm too ugly. And it's like, well, even if that's true, even if you were suddenly to magically click your fingers and reverse that, and then you've got a girlfriend, now what? You're still not going to be wonderfully happy either. It's the in many cases your problems begin when you involve yourself in a relationship with the other, because then suddenly it's not just you anymore. Then suddenly you're taking on board the characteristics, the flaws, the trauma, the emotional wounds or whatever it is of that other person, as well as your own. All right, and that in many cases can be a pretty heady brew, which is why a lot of relationships start to get into difficulties. Okay.
A little story time of past Valentine solo dates that I've taken myself on. So the most recent one last year, I was still living in my hometown. I hadn't even moved to Birmingham yet. I had just gone to the...
She's in Birmingham.
City centre, like...
I thought it was London. Oh, well, okay. Well, there you go. I thought it was London.
Shopping centre, and decided to do a full date day there. So I took myself shopping first, treated myself to some new clothes, and then I went to an Italian restaurant to take myself on a lunch date, and then I also did a cafe day, and I also did a museum day, like all back to back. It was a full day. It was really fun. But when I started off with my shopping date, I was checking out, I was at Zara, and the cashier was like, oh, what are you doing? Like, what are your plans for Valentine's Day? Because it was the 14th that I celebrated it. And I said, oh, you know, just taking myself out to lunch after this, doing some shopping, might go to a museum. And he said, oh, he was like, you're all alone, why? And I was like, because I want to be. I just thought, I love this holiday and I love celebrating it with myself. I really enjoy my alone time. And he just made the weirdest face at me, like, oh, like really, really judgy. But thankfully that wasn't the first time that I'd celebrated Valentine's alone. So even though he was being very judgmental, it wasn't getting to me. Like, I feel like I just had this shield up that whatever judgment or negative vibes you throw at me, they can't penetrate this wall, okay? This wall is my unbreakable confidence that I have built from being alone and establishing the strongest sense of self, which evidently you don't have. Because here's the thing, you guys.
I mean, it's interesting that she would even have to defend that, though, isn't it? Because, and FJ Flores says, this woman can have a date on Valentine's Day if she wants. It's not the case for many men who are around couples, and the women in those couples have probably done very little to attract those men. Now, obviously, she is an attractive girl, okay? So, clearly, as you say, there is no problem with her. She could easily, on that Valentine's Day she describes, when she was in Zara, she could easily have got a date for that night. There probably would have been queues of guys who would have taken her out for a date that night. So clearly the choice to be on her own on that day was hers. Now, it's interesting, though, that you see an attractive woman here who is almost having to, or feels like she has to overcome a, you know, societal shame around it, right? Because from the guy's point of view, you think, well, she's pretty. She could easily get a date. So the guy in Zara who's saying to her, oh, what are you doing tonight? And she says, I'm not doing anything. And he looks at her as if it's really strange. Then you might think that she would just say, well, I mean, look, I mean, fuck you. Like, it's up to me what I do. Because look at me. Obviously, I could get a date if I wanted to. And as Flores here says, the same is not always true of the guy, because the guy who's in that position is going to feel shamed, because if the guy is not societally what women generally want, then he's going to feel like, well, I not only do I not have a date tonight, but that isn't even my choice. Okay, it's not even my choice not to have a date. That's been enforced on me by societal expectations, which I am unable to meet. Okay. And that's why a lot of these guys will feel less than and start to feel very depressed and very down on themselves and everything, because they feel like they have no power or leverage in the situation. Now, she does have power and leverage in the situation because she's young and she's attractive. Okay. And obviously, if she wanted to have a boyfriend then, or have a date for that night, she could have had one. Now, it might be that she had just, for whatever reason, she had taken that choice not to be with anybody. That's fine. Equally, it might be that the guys that were hitting her up were not particularly great, and there was nobody there that she really wanted to, to pursue things with, and that again is her choice. But one thing we can be certain of is that she would definitely have had options, and as you say, there are many guys who, in her situation, will not have had options. But it's just very interesting. If you think about female security, I think we tend as guys to think, okay, there's an attractive woman. She must be super confident because she knows she's attractive. She knows she can get, a bunch of guys, whatever. She must have this super intact ego. And it's quite clear from this little clip of the video that she actually doesn't. It's not that she feels, she says that she doesn't feel insecure about the fact that she was alone on that Valentine's Day because, she's a strong, independent woman and so on. But clearly it's something a circle she's had to square in her own mind, okay, which is quite revealing when you think about it, because it shows. And if you're a guy and you're watching this and you think, oh, these girls out here, she's pretty and so she's going to be impenetrable. She's going to have this super high ego, and everything goes right for her all the time. It's an interesting insight to recognize that women too have insecurities that they mask, okay? And even an attractive woman will have these insecurities around her status. Why don't you have a boyfriend, okay? So it's not as clear-cut as we perhaps think it is.